Welcome. The goal of this screencast is to explain and demonstrate the Uniface internal components UXMLReader and UXMLWriter. Point 1 introduce two new internal components and their APIs, which enable you to procedurally write, read, and parse any XML data. Uniface supports two approaches to inter-component communication: declarative XML handling, which use Uniface-compliant DTDs and built-in parsing to write, read, and validate XML streams, and procedural XML handling, which enables you to create your own XML handler to write, read, and parse any XML data in streams and files. The reason for introducing these two components is that handling XML in proc is much more flexible than using DTDs or the statements XML load and XML save. Situations where you would want to use these internal components are when you need to read or write an XML document that expresses entities as XML elements and fields as attributes, or you need to write information from a table to a nested XML structure, or for example you need to read and parse a nested XML structure and display the data in a form, or restore it in the database, or maybe send it to another application. So let's have a look on how to use the UXMLWriter. To generate customized XML data, you need to use the operations available from the UXMLWriter component API. For each XML document you want to generate, create an instance of the UXMLWriter component, and here's an example on how to do that. The start document operation must be called before any other operation on the UXMLWriter instance. It generates the beginning of the document, and you have the option to include a header by setting the Boolean parameter of this operation to true. The next step is to add XML comments, elements, and attributes using the operations available on the UXMLWriter component, but we'll have a look at this later during the demonstration. To retrieve the resulting XML document, you need to call the getDocument operation, and here's an example on how to store the document into the variable vxmldoc. The second parameter is a Boolean in parameter, and it indicates whether the XML document return is kept in memory. The get document can only retrieve a maximum of about 10 megabytes, so you may need to issue multiple calls to this operation if your file is larger than that. Here are a few examples on how to use the start element operation. This operation inserts the beginning of an element tag. An XML element is everything from the element's start tag to the element's end tag. Attributes provide additional information about an element, and that information goes inside the start tag. The characters can be called to add text inside an element, but this text is placed between the start tag and the end tag. You also have the option to specify a prefix or a URI, Uniform Resource Identifier, when calling the start element operation. In our demonstration, the same component will be called recursively in order to create a parent-child structure. You can then manipulate the data as required by carrying on invoking the start element, add attribute, characters, and of course end element to add the closing tag. After the data is manipulated as required, you need to call the end document operation, which will end the XML document closing all open tags. The get document operation is called again. The XML text constructed up to this point is copied to the XML document parameter, which can then be stored in a database or dumped or appended to an XML file using file dump. And finally, you can delete the instances of UXMLWriter when they are no longer required. The memory occupied by the XML documents that are being generated is not freed up until the instances are deleted. To free up this memory and prevent a memory leak, it's very important to delete any unused component instances. Demo comes as part of the Uniface samples, and the zip file is called integrate.xml.zip. Let's start by having a look at the Write XML data form. The data here represents an organization of departments that contain other departments. In XML, this data structure will be represented as nested elements of departments within departments. So let's have a look how to use the UXMLWriter component to write information from a table to a nested XML structure. Of data model, department is the main entity and parent department is a functional subtype. Let's have a look at the code on the detail trigger of the Write to XML button. We start by instantiating the UXMLWriter component and then using the handle to access its operations. The first operation that we will call is start document to generate the beginning of the document, and I'm passing through as a parameter because I want a header to be included. Next, you can call the doc comment operation and add comments. Then we call the get document operation to retrieve the XML text that has been constructed up to this point. False means that I don't want the return XML document to be kept in memory. And then we use file dump to dump it into an XML file. The most external tag is open and close here, using start element and end element operations. Let's have a look now how to create the main body of this document. So let's have a look at the XMLWrite local proc. In this local proc, I am looping through the records of the parent entity. If the department has a child, another instance of this component is called recursively. Let's now create a file. As you can see here, I'm instantiating the component, calling the start document, adding comments, then calling the get document operation, starting the element department, and then calling the local procedure to create the main body of the document. Because the first department has children, a new instance of this component is called. And this will be done recursively all the way through to the end. Let's have a look at the file that has been created. And here it is, the departments tag, all the internal departments and the children with the level 2, level 3 and so on.